Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Claire Knight. I'm Commercial Director at Essential, and I'm joined today by Sarah Appleyard, who's Head of Design and Marketing here at Essential. And she handles a lot of the floor plan design requests that come through the business. We've been doing this for over a decade now, but the emphasis has switched very much from room booking to desk booking as really a primary objective for many of the companies that we're working with. And when you are looking at desk booking, it's so much more dependent on user experience. For people and teams to book a space to work, do that effectively, find the right building, find the right place to work, and therefore the floor plans become a really important component of that user experience. And there are different ways to get floor plans, and depending on what system you're using, there might be different elements to those floor plans. But we're here just to share some learning, because I think we've probably had 10 years of experience in 1 year this year. It feels like we've done as many floor plans this year as we helped customers with in the couple of years previously. So it's been very, very condensed learning, and we really wanted to share it because we're aware from the amount of organisations that we're speaking to on a daily and weekly basis that this element of it is something that's really important, but not necessarily well documented or well considered. And for those organisations who want to have more of a hand, maybe reduce the cost and do their own design, this session's for you. Or at least get ready to, if you're not doing your own design, you're working with a partner like Essential or another partner for your chosen solution. There's a lot that you can do as a business to be aware of how to make that process more smooth and maybe cut down the cost.
Sure. So picking up on what Claire said there, what our team, the design team at Essential, brings to the party when it comes to workspace booking systems is the graphical side of things. And just to position what we're going to talk about here today, as Claire says, we're talking about a capability here that's really going to make things easy for sharing a new workplace that might be very different in a very different layout. So this concept of looking at a floor plan and being able to say, yes, I want that particular workspace, and click on it and make a booking, you know, for the next day or for next week, that's become a very sought after capability. And it is a component in so many different floor plan solutions that are out there. And they typically kind of work in this way, where you have an underlying graphic, and then overlaying that graphic, it's almost like a coordinates point. That point coincides with the ID of that particular thing on the floor plan, be it a desk, a collaboration space, a meeting room. And by clicking on that space, that point on the graphic, you can then interact with that item and then book it. So what we're talking about is the foundation. It's the graphic that underlies the kind of interactive component which overlays it. So let's move on. And what I want to talk you through today is 7 tips that we've pulled together over the 10 years of working on floor plans that our professional services team goes through as we help an organisation plan this one component, albeit a very important component, of their workspace booking system. And I'm going to explain how we get from what you're looking at on the screen here to something a lot more refined, and something that's less to do with an architectural plan and more to do with a desk or workspace booking system, so it's more aligned to the job in hand. So 7 tips, and I'm going to kick off with probably the most controversial tip when I kind of come out with it, or our team tables it as a concept, and that is get it the right way up. Okay, so I'm sure you'll be very, very familiar with the architectural CAD diagram of your office. And it's a great tool for the trade. It tells you where exactly things are, including the risers and the ducting and all the fire escapes, everything like that. But one thing that's true of many floor plans, certainly the ones we receive, is that they're not necessarily best aligned for the process of booking a workspace, and I'll explain why. So we typically get a CAD diagram that's straight off the architect's table, printed out into a file, and it just opens up, you know, a particular orientation. And it may be that it's laid out in a plot and north is at the top, and that's fair enough. But when it comes to the process of booking a workspace, most cartographers would agree that when you're looking at something like a map of a building or a complex, like a shopping complex, the typical convention for orientation is to have your main entrance at the bottom of the map. Okay, gets a bit complicated because you might have different ways of entering the building that might land you up in different parts of the building. But if you've got a main entrance, and everybody knows where that main entrance is, my top tip for you would be to put your entrance at the bottom of your floor plan. Okay, ignore the way it has been used for years and years and years as a facilities tool, straight off the designer's CAD application. Ignore all that. You might be used to it, but bear in mind that you've got people that perhaps they're familiar with the building, but they might not be familiar with the new layout of what's in that building. And also, you will have new starts that are encountering your office building for the first time. So by putting the entrance at the bottom, it means that when someone's booking a workspace in advance, they're not going to be in the building, they're just going to be assimilating the floor plan from home. And the main entrance is a really good starting point for them to start their kind of navigation from, especially if they're going to be arriving at building for the first time. An interesting thing that's just crept into some of our floor plan designs, we've got an example here, to help with that whole orientation messaging. This particular customer has a lovely office overlooking the Thames, asked me to incorporate a view of either side of the building, what you would see if you're on the left hand side and what you'd see on the right hand side of the building. And you know, I think that's quite a nice approach, really. It helps with orientation, but it also helps with another thing that we're finding, and certainly when I go into the office, I don't have to go back to my usual desk in a darkened room overlooking the car park. I actually go straight to a desk which I know has got a good couple of screens on it, and I've got a nice view of the sea. So joking aside, when you're looking at people sitting at home thinking, oh, am I going to come into the office? Where am I going to sit? Perhaps I've lost my regular desk. It just helps them feel confident about where they're going to sit, and to some extent will act as an incentive. So as it says here, they'll get first dibs at the best views available from the office if they go in. So that's number one. So we've squared away the orientation. The next tip, and this is a big one, it's simplify your map. As we saw earlier, we've got all sorts of detail of, you know, the risers, the ducts, the gents urinals. Just get rid of all that visual confusion that's not helping the job in hand, as it says here, of booking a workspace. Okay, if you clear all that out as well, depending on the application you use, some of them will use a vector graphic, which is a really efficient way of viewing a graphic, being able to zoom in and out. And the smaller you can make your vector graphic, the faster your floor plan will load. So, you know, some of those CAD diagrams that I receive, they can be about 20 megabytes in size, and I load them up into my graphics application, and literally the graphics application will crash because they're big and they're badly behaved. And if you want to talk about that in more detail after this call, then I'd love to spend time with you.
Well, it's a really good point. I guess people are interacting with these things on their mobiles from their home. They might be booking from home and then coming in and using their phone to navigate around a building. So it needs to be that you're not stood there waiting and waiting for it to load up.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's talk about that kind of stripping out process. So as you saw earlier, we have something that's very busy and would take a long time to load, and this is after. Okay. So let's go back and forth on that. Yeah, I mean, in this case they wanted to book desks and they wanted to book rooms. What you're seeing here hasn't had the desk numbers applied yet, and I'll move on to that, but you can see you've got the major thoroughfares outlined. You've just got where the loos are. We haven't shown how to get into the loos. That's not important at this stage. All I want to do at this point is book a room, book a desk. Okay. The other vital thing that's missing off this floor plan, and I don't know why I missed it off, but we'll come on to this, is where the coffee is. Because I don't know about you. If I was coming into this room, I'd probably pick one near the coffee and nearest the loos.
You know me well enough to know that's also true.
There you go. So let's look at the labeling. Okay, so obviously everything that is in that graphic that's going to be bookable needs to be labeled somehow. If it's desks, then they might have a desk number. If it's a meeting room, they might have a nice memorable name, or they might just have a number. My top tip when it comes to desk numbering in particular is try and keep it simple and foolproof. Okay, we do work with very large organisations that have a office naming and floor numbering and therefore desk numbering convention, which might build up out of several components. So in this example, we've got the type of resource be desk, the building code, floor number, workspace number. So you end up with something like this. Okay, and I'm sitting at home and I book desk DTVP 2001, and that will appear in my calendar typically when I've booked it. But you know what it's like, you're trying to remember something off the top of your head when you walk in. If I knew it was just 2001, I'd probably manage to remember that. But that additional code at the beginning, I would argue that is pretty much unnecessary to include into the desk number. Not only will it be absolute visual overload when you start adding all those numbers potentially to each individual desk on the floor plan I just showed you, that will just really ruin your nice streamlined image. But again, it's too much information at the particular point in time at which the viewer sees that when they're booking a workspace in advance. And certainly with the systems that we work with, if I see a desk I like the look of because it's near the resources that I want when I come into the office, when I click on that desk, the number of the desks will come up. And like I say, if you try and simplify it, at worst case, I would recommend that you perhaps include the level number and the desk number in the
right. Like hotel numbering. So if it begins with a 2, it's second floor. That's
exactly right. Yeah. So if you've got less than 99 desks on a floor, you could, for example, have a 3-digit code to represent that desk, which will be 401. And you're going to go to the 4th floor and number 1 on that floor. If it was just 001 and you get out of the lift on the wrong level, you're pretty much stuffed.
Yeah, very confusing when the building gets busy.
Yeah, indeed. And also when you apply numbers to the desk. So again, we're working with facilities teams that are just going through that process of renumbering desks. And there's an art to this. And again, you can probably do a degree in this subject. I'm sure as a facilities person, you're really aware of the techniques that can be applied. But certainly, I would recommend, if here and now you're wanting to call out COVID secure desks that are spaced out, for example, 2 meters apart, or you're just thinking of about the new workspaces that you're having to provide to support the whole new thing of hybrid working, then there's ways that you can deploy to make your numbering convention both COVID friendly and future proof. For example, when you're numbering desks across a floor, if you mentally or physically walk the floor and allocate numbers as you go along, starting with the first desk you encounter in the space, and then a nice idea is to loop round a bank of desks. And as you work up, the numbers get higher, and then you go to the other side of the floor. Okay, so the point I want to make here is that this was a real life example where someone had been sitting with a floor plan in front of them and just went from left to right. Okay, now from a COVID friendly point of view, or unfriendly in this case, if I was walking into this space for the first time and I had booked desk 19, if we went for this numbering convention, I could see a pattern as it was going up and up and up, and number 19 would be on this left hand side. Whereas with this convention, I'd have to be dodging from side to side to work out where number 19 was, and it's over here. Okay, so with COVID restrictions, ideally you want to keep a single flow of traffic around the floor space. So that's one thing to think about. And also another thing you can use to help people find their desk, and this is used all the time in hotels. You come out of the lift and you can see that room numbers within a certain range are off to the left, ditto on the right, and you can use that same device to actually put signs up around the workspaces to let them know. For example, you might have a wing, you can let them know that in this wing you've got from desk range blah to blah, and they know that perhaps if their desk is higher than that number, they move on to the next location to look through. So I'll move on because I'm labouring over this, I know, but it's a deep subject. And well, just before I leave this, my top tip is whether you're looking at COVID secure desking or future proof hybrid working desking, even though here and now you might only want to deploy certain desks as hot desks or COVID secure desks, number all the desks in the space, because that enables you to rework what's what without having to physically renumber the desks. Okay, so this was again a real life example of a floor plan we were given, and as you can see, they've kind of painted themselves into a corner in terms of this particular desk number regime. Okay, so onto the subject of physical labelling. If you have a regime by which you book a desk by a number or a workspace by an ID of such, if you don't marry that up with physical labelling in the office space itself, you're going to be in trouble basically, because if you can imagine, you booked desk 39 and there's no labeling, how do you know that you've arrived at the right desk? Just how do you know? So here's some examples of what our clients have done to label their desk. You can start with something really low tech, a little printed label stuck on the top of a screen. You can get some really neat little discs some of our clients have used where you can incorporate the desk number and a little QR symbol within like a neat little disc, and people can see the number, and also the QR code lets them book the desk in the first place if they haven't already, or check in to something that they've already booked. And then you can go a bit more high tech. You can get a device which sits on the desk with the ID of the workspace on the screen and lets you check in and book, etc., etc. But oh gosh, my top tip is you must label the physical workspace.
That makes sense.
Okay, so we talked earlier about the concept of stripping back the detail. The top tip here is once you've stripped it away, start adding stuff in that's going to help with the process of booking a workspace. So let's look at what that extra stuff is. Okay, on your map, we've got an opportunity, and I would say it's a great opportunity to help communicate the measures, especially, you guys on the facility side, you've been flogging your guts out, to be frank, to prepare workspaces to make them COVID secure, and also to rework your workspaces to provide more of the kind of facilities that people need when they come into the office. There's been a lot of collaboration pods rolled out there, I've seen, you know, and just kind of touchdown areas, etc., etc. So along with calling out those kind of facilities, it's also a good idea to incorporate other things that will help people not only locate their perfect desk, but make them feel confident that their safety and well-being has been thought about when they come into the office. So I'm going to share with you some examples of the icons that we've been adding to floor plans for our clients. Okay, so let's first of all look at the well-being messaging. Obviously, you're going to add the WCs, the fire exits, etc. But third one in on there, that's been used a lot. It's a hand sanitizer symbol. So you're not going to book a desk next to the hand sanitizer. You might, I don't know. But it's all about the messaging. It's communicating to your colleagues that you are taking their well-being at heart. And other symbols that coincide with that are the first aid symbol, of course, the AED devices. The one on the right isn't a man with a Zimmer frame or a walking stick, which is often what it's misdiagnosed as. It's actually a symbol for riser desk. Again, we see a lot of riser desks on floor plans, and it's nice to be able to call those out visually. The systems that we work with allow you to press a few buttons to see specifically the desks that are riser desks on the floor plans, but you can call those out visually as well if you want to. And then the most important symbol is on the bottom left there, the coffee. Yes.
I have seen, am I right in thinking I've seen on one of our systems that you can actually see where people, you've got the first aid symbol on your first slide there. You can actually see where there's a first aider sitting. If somebody is marked in the system as a qualified first aider, is that right?
Yeah, so that's where the intelligent layer, which overlays what we're talking about here, comes into play. Okay, so basically, when the first aider or person who's able to operate their AED system, or you know, other key member of staff to do with well-being, when they book their desk, their role is actually built into the system. So wherever they book, the pin that locates where they are will show up a different color or with a different label. Yeah, I think it's quite cute. So the other kind of things that is nice to call out on a whole new workspace that you preferred, because people have lost their own drawers. That didn't sound good, did it?
Yeah, my own drawers.
Lockers. Call out lockers on your floor spaces where people can store their personal effects, their coats when we get into winter, where they can find stationery, where the printer is. Perhaps you've got a 3D plotter, I don't know, and the shredder, where there's a quiet space or where there's desks with multiple screens. So all of these kind of little icons, again, you could add things like the multiple screens or the quiet space into the filters, but it's nice to call it out so it's there at a glance when you look at the workspace. And then, like I said before, there's so many different types of new workspaces that are being added. So you've got the booths with the video conferencing screens and the nice funky pods. So it's nice to call them out. And on the right there, on the circular pod, you see that the capacity of that space is being called out very clearly. Again, when you look at a meeting room, for sure, you might want to set a filter on the capacity and just call out automatically on the floor plan rooms that are able to accommodate more than 10 people. But this is a great way to call it out, like I say, at a glance. And then, yeah, some environmentally aware messages that you might want to add in your car park booking spaces. Where to plug in your electric car is becoming very popular. So that's a lot of stuff to add, but I believe it is important to help people find their feet in a new workplace. So we're going to talk about how you can optimize the real estate on the screen to include all this stuff. So yeah, our team does this a lot. So you'll get a huge CAD diagram, and the client would like to get it all on one screen. And it might be 50 desks here and 50 desks there, but the overall footprint that those 100 desks occupy is at polar ends of one space, so to speak. So what we do is a bit of artistic license to kind of maximize what you see on the screen. And, you know, in the example I said where you've got some desks over here and desks over there, we actually take out the bit that isn't important, like the passageway in between in this example. We condense it all down and we get so much more space to fill with what's important.
That's critical, I guess, when these things are also being designed for mobile devices as well as, you know, booking from a desktop. When it actually comes to navigate, you might be doing that from a really small screen.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, coming back to this whole thing of not worrying about putting desk numbers on the floor plan or on each individual desk, you ideally want to enable people to, at a glance, see what they want to book and not have to zoom in to the nth degree to work out what they want to book. So here's a good example. It's a very busy car park in this instance, but it could be an office. And this particular company just has certain banks of the car park area that's allocated to their company. So instead of kind of using this map, what you can do is just, you know, call out in box outs the bits that are relevant on that map. I've added a bit of context, as you can see on the left hand side, and context always helps, as we've talked about earlier. But yeah, you're getting a lot more on a much smaller screen, and you can see how that technique could be applied to a big office floor space where you've just got little banks, little clusters of hot desks. Okay. So the next top tip is to get your designer hat on and inject a little bit of flair in there. What we're finding is, joking aside, the design element of your floor plan is really important because a lot of people are going to be using this plan day in, day out at all levels through the organisation. So it's going to be a very high profile project with lots of eyes on it. And when we provide services, we try really hard to make it look good and also to make it look consistent, because we work with clients that have got lots of buildings in lots of locations. And what we want to do is create an experience which, regardless of the office you're going to be visiting, when you go to the desk booking or workspace booking system, it looks familiar. The same conventions are used, the same color schemes, the same icons. So it just makes it easy to get to grips with. And what we tend to do is, if there is a fabulous color scheme in the office that you want to pick out, then we can do that. Failing that, we just build on your company colors. We look at the colors on your website. A lot of people provide their branding guidelines, so we use the right font, you know, the right color scheme. Some clients send us in videos of a walk around their office. Yeah, we try really hard because it is important. It's important, like I say, from a communications point of view. You've spent a lot of time preparing a very nice looking new workspace to come back to. So all this design, it really plays into the communications about the new workspace. We've actually incorporated for a couple of clients some nice features that have been added to the workplace, including, in this case, a growing wall that has got the client's logo called out in different coloured planting. It looks fabulous. So thought, well, why not indicate that on the floor plan? And all the different types of furniture that people are buying in, why not really represent what those pieces of furniture look like on the floor plan? So that's the kind of thing we do, and it is well received. So even if you choose not to use our services, if you want to do this yourself, I really do feel that it is worth investing a little bit of effort in the design department. But whatever you do, my top tip to you in this respect is to avoid the colours of red and green. My heart sinks when I get a branding guide where the predominant colours are red and green. Because basically, when you overlay the interactive component of the floor plan, which shows whether a desk or a room is free or busy, the predominant colours are red and green. So avoid overuse of those colours because confusion will reign. So my final tip, if you're going to go about designing a floor plan, whether you want to do it yourselves in-house or working with us, that is to get the right people involved in the project, because it does involve quite a few different disciplines within the company. We often will have, if it's a brand new workspace and it's yet to be commissioned, we'll probably include the design team behind the workspace who can provide input on what the key visuals are in the workspace itself, what the colour schemes are. Certainly the facilities team is absolutely crucial in this whole process, because you know what facilities, new workspaces you're rolling out. And a lot of the times when I've been working on floor plans, the workspace has been in a state of flux. And we're kind of moving things around as pieces of furniture have been moved around. But anybody involved in design will know that it's so difficult to keep everybody happy. Sometimes if you try and reflect everybody's input into this process, you can end up with something, you know, that looks like it's been designed by a committee, a big committee. So perhaps you've got a few questions.
Oh, Sarah, sorry, just to dive in there, I just wanted to just to share for anyone watching this now or in the future, because I know we'll be sharing it on our website at some point. Could you share a little bit about the actual tool that you use? How do you and the team design these floor plans?
Ah, right. Yeah,
is that giving away too many of your secrets?
No, not at all. And right. There's a couple of things to know about the file format that typically is used by a desk booking or workspace booking system. Some use just a kind of regular JPEG or PNG kind of graphic that might be used for a photograph. Others use a vector graphic, okay? And a vector graphic is something that, rather than little dots of colour, if you like, in drawing a graphic, it uses commands, coordinates, instructions to draw a circle. Any application that enables you to create a vector graphic is a good starting point. The applications we use is Adobe Illustrator in the main. It's not a dedicated floor plan design system like AutoCAD, for example. We feel it gives us benefits because systems like that tend to draw things very differently. As I said, you know, one line might be made up of lots of little lines, whereas a vector graphic package like Adobe Illustrator, you can create a very small, concise file, like I say, which is quick to load. Other applications you could use, you can get a freeware system called Inkscape, or you can use something like Visio. But if you use the Visio kind of architectural CAD diagramming package, you're likely to end up with something that looks similar to this again. But anyway, I'm going into a lot of detail. If you want to discuss it separately or pick my brains on this subject, then by all means drop me an email. But I just wanted to finish up with a few befores and afters. So I've got a before here and then the after here, just to switch back and forth. You probably notice that the central component there actually gets bigger, and that's because we used artistic license in this one to actually give more real estate to that bookable desk zone. Okay, so you can see at a glance the desks there, whereas here you might have had to kind of zoom in a bit, and there's lots of visual interference around the outside edge. Oh, this is a favourite. This is an example of one where you perhaps started out with the original floor plans and haven't had chance to go back to the architect and get new plans redrawn, but you're scribbling on there and seeing what furniture you can move from A to B. So we'll get something like that very typically, and then that was the outcome, and that reflects the corporate colour scheme used by this particular group. This is another example, another favourite of mine, where again that looks quite complicated, but it's been streamlined and we've added the view outside of the window. Okay, so yeah, so that was about it from me. Apologies, we've gone really quickly through a bunch of subjects, which you could probably do a whole university degree in each of those one subjects, really.
Kind of been a whistle-stop tour of the workshop that you most frequently do with customers that we work with. So thank you, because you really properly downloaded your brain there. A huge amount. I mean, needless to say, we offer services around this when we're working with organisations to help simplify and streamline the floor plans and turn them into usable assets for the organisation. So we can certainly help. We also help some of our customers with adding the links and pinning those as well. So there are all sorts of ways that Essential as an organisation might be able to help. We've got a question from Colin, which I think probably is best taken offline, Colin, actually, and we'll get back to you because it depends on the system that you're using, but you've asked about obtaining statistics from the booking system, such as the number of times a user has booked a desk in the office over a period of time. Yes, I believe that's entirely possible.
Yes.
So usually we can get output from the system so that it can help you figure out who's using what and where. So we'll get back to you on that one. We'll take that offline. Yeah,
so a separate discussion altogether, but it would be interesting to see whether people go for that desk with a view over.
Well, it's certainly something we've been talking about internally with our own offices, which we are planning to shrink down the space, and we're using a lot less of it than we used to, and that's very much a thought on our minds, is what is actually being used, what resources are being used most often. So yeah, good question. If you'd like, I know you've offered before, Sarah, but if anybody would like the icons that you shared, can they get in touch with you? I see your contact details are on that final slide.
Yeah, sure. If anybody would like to incorporate them in their own floor plans, then drop me a line and I'll send you a file.
All right, well, thank you very much. Look at us finishing absolutely on time. You say you rattled through it, but no, I think that was perfect. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time this afternoon. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.